Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well. In today's video, I am starting a new sketchbook. I finally got my hands on my very first Moleskine, which I have been wanting to try for a while now. Typically, I have used Strathmore brand in the past, but I saw this on a sale when I was hunting for a new sketchbook, and I figured now is the time to try it. Unwrapping this was super satisfying. The cover is more sturdy than the Strathmore brand, and I like the little band that keeps it closed. The size is also quite nice. It's a little smaller than an A5 sheet, but it's the right size for something you can bring on the go or work in at home. I like that the cover is a little sturdier than sketchbooks I typically work with. I think it'll hold up a little better and not get as easily creased or scratched up. I also really enjoy the paperweight. It's got a nice thickness and a little bit of tooth, so I think this will be a great sketchbook to carry around for painting on the go. I'm hoping to use this sketchbook both at home and outside this summer. Okay, so as I typically do, I never like to draw on the first pages of my sketchbook, like ever. I typically come back to the first page much later when it's like half filled. There's a lot less pressure to make it look good, and the sketchbook feels more broken in, if that makes sense. I think I mentioned this in my previous sketchbook tours, which I'll link to those if you're interested in seeing some previous sketchbooks and work I finished. So to follow on that, I decided to start this page on the second spread, not the very front page. I'll come back to that sacred front page at a later date, or I'll just cover it in stickers as I've done in the past. I began this painting with taping a border. I typically tape down my paintings when I'm working on loose leaf watercolor paper, but I decided to tape down the sketchbook page just in case it started to buckle. The paper actually held up really well with the paint, so in the future I might just forego taping the border. I do like having nice clean edges on a painting, but this is a sketchbook, so it doesn't have to be neat and tidy. The painting I'm working on in this scene is from a photo I took a little while ago. I'm painting with my miya himi gouache and synthetic brushes. I'm planning on bringing this sketchbook around this summer as a little travel companion, so I wanted to start it off with a painting that kept with the travel theme. This scene is from a photo I took in Paris at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and it was honestly one of the most magical experiences ever. The scene was so breathtaking. My boyfriend and I went up there just as the sun was setting, and we caught the cityscape in both daylight and at night. I stood there for over an hour just watching the lights come on one by one as the city transitioned from day to night. This scene goes in tandem with my latest video from last week. Both this scene and that one are from photos I took that same night. The previous video was a view from the other side of the tower. Hopefully I can do a larger scale version of this painting with oils. These two paintings really showed me just how fun painting a night scene can be. I really like the contrast between the dark colors and the bright lights, especially in gouache. I find starting a gouache painting to be super satisfying in the beginning because you load up your brush with a lot of paint and coat the page entirely in it. This stage is super loose and free. I'm not caught up at all with making anything look polished or refined. I'm just establishing the basic shades. I recently picked up this tip for doing a straight line on horizons by using a piece of tape. I honestly cannot believe I never thought of this before. It actually makes painting a straight line so much easier. In the past, I would have spent an embarrassing amount of time painting and repainting the background to make my horizon line somewhat straight. This tip is great, especially for gouache or acrylics, which dry really fast and won't move when you pull the tape up. After I painted the top half with the clouds, I peeled off the tape to give myself a straight line to fill in the bottom. If this painting was larger, I probably would have shifted the tape up to keep my horizon line straight on both sides, but the small scale made it easy enough to have a steady hand while I was following the line. I'm honestly super happy with the quality of the paper in this sketchbook. I was a little hesitant it would buckle at first, but the paper held up really well with the amount of paint I put on. This is a great quality sketchbook for water-intense painting. I haven't used my watercolors in it yet, but I can imagine that since it accepted gouache so well, it would also handle watercolor. As with many of my gouache pieces, I worked from background to foreground. I begin by blocking in my major colors to cover the page. I find that covering the whole page, or canvas when I'm working on a canvas, makes it a lot less daunting to actually jump into the piece. I don't get sucked into details too fast before I've filled the painting. I sketched the outline of the composition on top of the two tones of canvas. This piece is divided in half, the top portion being the sky and the bottom the city. I haven't worked on a piece this blue before. I normally gravitate towards very light, vibrant greens, but I actually really liked doing a night scene. I think gouache does really well with strong, contrasting pieces. The dark blues of the sky and buildings make the yellow and white lights really pop. After I had sketched in the main composition, I began to block in the different buildings. This painting was particularly tricky because I wanted to figure out a way of implying that there are a lot of buildings without painting each and every building. I really admire artists that are able to capture the essence of a scene without going into every little detail. They know just how to use the paint to imply something without needing to render it in full detail. I hope to develop this more as a skill with my artwork as I continue to paint. Plus, this is also just a sketchbook painting. I don't think I have a paintbrush small enough to paint all the balconies and lights in Paris. That would be crazy. To imply the look of a lot of buildings, I had to gradually build up my values. I started with panels of blue hues to establish the overall shapes of where the buildings are. I placed these with relative accuracy in where they are and tried to stagger them to make it seem like there are buildings of varying heights and shapes. While Haussmann in Paris is very uniform at the street level, being on top of the Eiffel Tower really revealed just how diverse architecturally this city is. There are so many different styles and types of buildings all over Paris that make it so distinct and beautiful. This staggered way of working was the most fun part of painting. I can just experiment and play around with the scene without worrying about being entirely accurate. To make these shapes stand out more, I went in with black to outline the shadows cast by the darker buildings and the windows. This isn't pure black, I mixed it with some blue to keep it close to the other shades. I never like to use pure black paint in my paintings because it can clash with the other colors. Adding a blue hue or a brown hue to black paint, depending on the context around it, can really soften it. Once I had established the general shapes of the buildings, I went back and forth between black and blue to establish the collection of buildings. Using black as an outline and shadow defined the differentiation between buildings, paths, and the bridge. As this reference is from nighttime, the lamps had all turned on, casting a yellow glow on the sidewalks and the water of the Seine. To create the pathways, I used a yellow and tan mix with white. Because I was painting on very dark backgrounds, and the gouache is water-soluble, I had to use a thick layer of paint to cover the areas with yellow. I used the same shade in the lights coming from the windows and the lampposts. Along with my process of painting, I wanted to chat about my YouTube channel as a whole. I'm trying to experiment more with content as I work on my channel. Do you all like the longer form videos where I talk like this, or the shorter videos with me painting? I like that in this format of video you can see me painting for longer in real time, but do you all prefer this as well? As I continue to work on my channel, I really want to experiment with the type of art content I make. I like making different kinds of videos, so hopefully the variation is interesting. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. I am always open to new ideas. I am really happy to have a platform to share some of my work with you all. Painting water is always a fun challenge. I still haven't quite figured out a technique to paint water ripples so that it looks entirely realistic, but maybe I also don't want it to be super realistic. That's just something that I'm wrestling with in my art. I think adding the shadows and highlights in the water is also something that really ties the painting together. The Seine is super vibrant around the city when it reflects all the lights. I think the contrast between the black shadows cast by the bridges and the bright lights of the lamps and the bridge lights makes the water stand out a lot more. Adding in the lights is where the painting really started to come together more. These were added with bands of white and yellow or dots, depending on their location. The contrast between the yellow and white lights and the dark buildings made this scene feel like it truly was a night scene. I really enjoyed the process of dotting in the lights. They're like a little constellation throughout the piece. Similar to my original process of painting the buildings, I wasn't being overly precise or careful with this. I added lights in the general areas they were, but I gave myself leeway to use brighter colors and add more lights in some areas and less in others. For the background, I used small dots of white to imply buildings being way off in the distance. And with that, this is the final result. The final tape peel is so satisfying. Giving the painting a sharp border really makes it feel complete. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for following along with this painting process and listening to my rambles. I hope to post more videos of the sketchbook soon in the future. Thank you all again for your continued support of my channel. I recently passed 4,500 subscribers, which is amazing. I am so happy to be making art videos for you all. Your support really means a lot. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you all in the next video really soon.